Good evening. I'm Sarah Remes, and I am the granddaughter of David Carliner, who was a powerful public interest lawyer who died about 11 years ago. And he wanted more than anything else to see his legacy of fierce public interest advocacy continue into the next generation. And he would be so happy to see all of you here fighting against the injustices of today. This year's winners of the David Carliner Award exemplify the best of his legacy and also demonstrate the breadth of what we hope to recognize with the award. I am pleased to announce the semifinalist, Toby Merrill, the director of the Project on Predatory Student Lending. Her work has protected hundreds of thousands of students who took out loans to attend for-profit schools, but left with thousands of dollars of debt, but no education or training. Unfortunately, Toby cannot be with us today because she just had a baby, creating the next generation of public interest lawyers. And tonight's winner of the David Carliner Award is Amaha Kassa, founder and executive director of African Communities Together. He is not only a litigator, but also an advocate and community organizer, and, of course, an agitator in David Carliner style. A refugee from Ethiopia himself, he exemplifies the best of working with a community, not just for a community. Amaha and African Communities Together represents and empowers African immigrants, and the work of the organization show the power of public interest lawyering. Their impact litigation has successfully prevented the Trump administration from canceling temporary protective status and other immigration benefits that protect African and other immigrants. They provide culturally and linguistically competent individual representation and advocacy to help hundreds of African immigrants get the immigration benefits to which they are entitled. They don't stop there. Policy advocacy has brought needed services to African immigrants. For example, expansion of French language access in New York City. And most importantly, they have organized the community and empowered community leaders to speak out. For example, one of their Liberian community leaders recently gave powerful testimony before the House Judiciary Committee on the need for a permanent legislative solution for TPS. This community organizing has created a powerful force that stands up for the rights of all immigrants. These are dark days for the immigrant and refugee communities, under attack from all corners of the administration. Amaha Kassa and African Communities Together provides a ray of light and a strong voice to fight back against xenophobia and racism. Please join me in congratulating Amaha Kassa.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. That guy sounds really impressive. I'd love to meet him. First, some thank yous. I want to thank ACS and, of course, the Carliner family for the generosity of this honor and for selecting me to share in it with the distinguished folks who are being honored this year and in previous years. I want to thank my dear friend Tam Ma, and fellow Berkeley Law, Go Bears, alum who nominated me for the award. Of course, I want to thank my really gifted and hardworking staff of African Communities Together, who really did all the heavy lifting on some of the victories that you've been hearing about. Our supporters, our volunteers, our donors, and first and foremost, of course, our extremely brave and resilient and hardworking members, particularly our members with temporary protected status, TPS, and deferred enforced departure, DED, who were brave enough to come out of the shadows to be plaintiffs on these lawsuits that have helped push back against the attempts of this administration to make them and their families illegal and subject to deportation. Also, I also want to thank my colleagues from the ARCA Foundation who are here, Joe, and my family. My sister Lali, I think, is here. I guess, so there's a saying about law school that it's a pie-eating contest where first place is more pie. But, you know, as you get older, you realize it's actually not just law school. That's like adulthood, right? You know, if you're good at something, then you find yourself doing it for the rest of your life. And, you know, I remember when I took my last law school exam, and, you know, after 4 years of a joint JD MPP program, I was like, wow, that's my last standardized test I'll ever take. And I forgot about a big one, you know, the bar exam. And, you know, I remember when I did my last admission to you know, after applying to many programs, I remember thinking, wow, okay, that's the last time I'm going to tell the story about like who I am and where I come from and why I do what I do. And of course, I forgot that in organizing and advocacy and in, you know, community building, we do that all the time. That's what we do. So I've had you know, in this award and in other opportunities, I've had a lot of chance to think about why I do what I do. So why do I do what I do? First, my mother who taught me everything about organizing. Like, you know, no professional organizer I've ever met has been more successful at getting large and, you know, fractious groups of people to work together towards a common goal than my mother. You know, and she also instilled values around public service and giving back to the community to me. Why do I do what I do? My father. I recently learned that during World War II, he was in a refugee camp in Kenya for many months or years. And so now when I hear about refugees in camps or refugees waiting at the southern border, what I imagine is my father. And I ask myself, what would I want for him in that situation? My father was later executed by the Derg regime in Ethiopia. And when I read about 100 Sudanese standing up, who were standing up for democracy in their country, and you know, they're murdered in the streets by the regime in Khartoum, I think of my father, and I think of my family who died in the civil war in Ethiopia. Why do I do what I do? My family came to the U.S. We were, as refugees, as asylum seekers, we didn't ultimately get our immigration status through asylum, but through adoption. So we were the fortunate ones. So many years later, when I was an organizer and I went looking for organizations that would support families like mine, I found they were few and far between, and eventually had that moment that I think a lot of us have, which is, you know, if this is going to happen, I'm going to have to do it myself. So that's why I do what I do. Why do I do what I do? Because like you, I read the news every day, and you know, just talking to Debbie Carliner about that first thing in the morning experience of like, oh, what's happened now? And you know, I go through the whole stages of grief that we all do, right? Of anger and sadness and denial. When I read about a 9-year-old migrant child who is being denied anti-seizure medication while she is in U.S. custody. When I read about a transgendered asylum seeker who was released from custody and died a couple of days later. When I see images of children in cages, packed in, you know, in a way that no human being should be, into a space. when I read about the hundreds of Africans as well as Central Americans at the southern border seeking asylum, seeking, as my family did, safety, freedom, opportunity, and the response is to either lock them out or to lock them up. I can boil over that, I can stew over that, I can, sort of write a sharp thing on social media, or I can try to figure out how to get together with other people like me and figure out how we change that. And that's why I do what I do. Why do I do what I do? Because even with all those challenges, sometimes, a surprising number of times, we win, and it's joyous. I remember hearing about the victory in the Ramos v. Nielsen lawsuit, which has pushed back the attempts of this administration to end temporary protected status for hundreds of thousands of immigrants. And I have to give thanks and praise to our legal partners on that, the ACLU, Endalon, all the 9 immigrant community-based organizations that led that litigation along with us, as well as our legal partners on the Deferred Enforced Departure lawsuit, Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, and Lawyers for Civil Rights Boston. You can give them a pause. And I remember the Ramos victory, and I remember the victory in the DED lawsuit, African Communities Together versus Trump. We're making T-shirts that say that. And just days ago, when we won the vote in the House of Representatives, 237 to 187 to pass the Dream and Promise Act, which would give permanent status to DACA holders and to TPS and DED holders from, including many of our members. And if I could, share with you all the email chains and the WhatsApp groups and the excited phone calls, if I could bottle that feeling and share it with you, I would. But until there's an app for that, just, you have to take my word for it. And last, why do I do what I do? Because we're in a moment where there are 2 competing visions of the future, 2 competing visions of our country. And one is a defensive, hunkered down, frightened vision where we're afraid of losing what little we have, where we blame our losses, our declining incomes, the fact that we struggle more every day on them, on immigrants, on asylum seekers, on black and brown people, on LGBT folks, on feminism. And instead of looking to the powerful and the wealthy who call the shots in the society, and instead of looking at the real causes of why it seems like we're working harder every day for less. That's one vision. And another vision says that we can have abundance. Another vision says that this country, that this world, it's not a pie where if you get more, I get less. It's a potluck where the more people who come, the more everybody eats. And people bring their dishes from their culture and their society, and it's not all potato chips and, bottled soda. And where we can have a future that's better for all of us. And I already know which side I'm on. Looking around this room, I have a pretty good idea of which side you're all on, and I know which side is going to win. So just to leave you, I'll share with you a little tradition that we have in my organization. It's something we borrowed from Kwame Nkrumah, who's one of the great fathers of Pan-Africanism, and it's a chant. It's call and response in like a good African tradition. And but it seems appropriate not just for our organization, but for ACS as well. And so what we say, I say forward ever, and you say backwards never. And we'll do it 3 times, okay? Are you ready? All right, warm up, stretch. All right. Forward ever. Backwards never. Forward ever. Backwards never. Forward ever. Backwards never. Thank you so much.